Welcome to Conversations with Jennylyn. I'm Adeeb Karam, stepping in for Jennylyn today, and we have an unbelievable show for you. We're actually going to talk to Jennylyn, get the background, and find out why she does what she does and why her background gives her the special ability to make her show so entertaining. Without further ado, hello, Jennylyn.
Hello, Adeeb.
How are you?
It's nice to be in the opposite chair. I'm great. Thank you.
That's so awesome. You know, I want to start. You have an amazing background, and it shows in a lot of your interviews. And I want to kind of go back a little bit and start from the beginning. Talk about the country you were born in, because I know it has a name that's always confused with another country. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I was born in formerly British Guyana. It's now a republic of Guyana. It's in South America on the northwestern tip, and it's often confused with Ghana, because in Africa, because I meet a lot of people who say to me, how come you're from Ghana? You're so fair. So I stopped them right there and I said, first of all, you're talking about another country, separate continent, but I was actually born on the continent of South America, and the country is called Guyana. There are 3 Guyanas. There's a British, a Dutch, and a French Guyana. I was born in the British country of Guyana, where they spoke English and was originally owned by the Brits.
Is that the only language they spoke over there, or is there multiple languages spoken in Guyana?
I think people are speaking more Spanish now because a large influx of Venezuelans have moved to Guyana since the uprising in Venezuela. But when I was going to school, we were only taught English, and if you wanted to learn Spanish, it was optional. It was never mandatory.
So is there 3 Guyanas now, or has it been united, or how is the situation there now?
No, they've never been united because they were all owned by different countries. I think there's one called Suriname that's owned by the Dutch. Mm-hmm. And then there's French Guyana, and then British Guyana, which is now Republic of Guyana, which is where I grew up and where I was born.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about how you grew up. Were you like a middle-class family? Were you upper middle class? Were you like working? Tell me a little bit about your life.
Where I lived, it was really hard to break. Well, my father worked for the government. We lived on a government compound. I grew up in a government compound. I grew up in a very small town. If you started walking in the morning and you didn't stop, you'd walk the length of it by the evening. It is called Mabaruma, and it's on the Guyana-Venezuelan border. And growing up, we were always told that the Venezuelans were going to come and take over at some point. So we grew up with soldiers constantly protecting those borders, because apparently the Venezuelans believed that Guyana was originally a part of Venezuela that somehow got separated during the times of Columbus. And so as long as we sat on all the natural resources, which are many, and we didn't touch them, they didn't bother us. Although there were many times when we were threatened that they were coming. So it was I guess if there were upper class, maybe my family would have been considered upper class. But I went to the same public schools as the other people living in the village, the same primary schools. It was so small that if you didn't go to the schools that were available, then you didn't go to school. It wasn't like you had a lot of choices. I think where I grew up must have had a population of 300 people total.
So your dad worked for the government.
Guyana became an independent country in May of 1966. Mm-hmm. And so while I was growing up, we were already independent. So he worked for the government of Guyana.
Oh, he worked for the government of Guyana. Yeah. Okay.
But my father, I grew up with a stepfather, and he is not Guyanese. And my mother was not Guyanese either. My mother was from Grenada. And my stepfather, who raised me, was from an island called St. Vincent. So both of my parents were from islands, and they moved to Guyana. And they met there.
Wow. So they were both immigrants. They were both immigrants to Guyana, and you were born there.
Yes, because my mother was already pregnant with me when she left Grenada.
So how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 11 half siblings. They're all half, although my sisters and brothers on my mother's side, I grew up with them. So for me, they're my true sisters and brothers. But then I have a Lebanese side that I met later in my life, but I still call them my brothers and sisters because they are. So I have 11 siblings scattered around the world.
So you're part Lebanese and part from. Tell me a little bit about.
My father's Lebanese and French from Beirut, and my mother, her father is mixed with Portuguese and Chinese, but he also was a native of Grenada, as was my grandmother. So my mother is Black, a little bit of Chinese and Portuguese mixture. So yeah, very mixed bloodline.
How do you identify?
Black woman. Black
you
woman.
identify as a Black woman?
Yes, because I grew up with a predominantly Black family and a Black culture, and because I think throughout my life, I've always said I was Black, although people have looked at me and always think I'm Chinese, always, or Japanese, or
Yeah.
Egyptian. I've been asked it all, but I've never really had someone come up to me and go, "Are you a Black woman?" Never. But that's what I identify with.
That's great. It's interesting. That means you'd make a great character actress because you can play all these parts from pretty much any country, right?
That's kind of funny because I was an actress since I was 10 years old.
Is that right?
Yeah, my teacher who trained me and entered me in the first competition that I won was talking me into finding a theater in San Francisco when I wound up doing television and decided I liked it better, and the rest is history.
Wow. So you started out as an actress. That's not too uncommon, actually.
Right.
That's I think Jon Stewart started out as a comedian actor. Quite a few of the top talk show hosts started out as in the acting or comedic business. Right before you came to the States, I want to talk about your first husband, how you guys met, and how you made the decision to leave everything behind and kind of come to this new place called the USA.
Love, that thing called love.
Yeah.
My ex-husband who brought me to San Francisco is a dentist who came to Trinidad and Tobago to provide dentistry for the underprivileged citizens. And while he was there, we were introduced by a mutual friend. And on the third day of knowing him, he told me he was going to marry me. And I said, nobody who knows they're going to get married after 3 days. Anyone who really believes that like that is not someone I want to marry. And he told me initially that he was not going to get married before he was 33. And I think when we met, he wasn't 33. He was a far ways away from it, I think, because he had just gotten his doctorate and moved to the Caribbean. And then 6 months later, we both got married. But we had a choice, either to break up our relationship because he was from San Francisco at the end of he was there for 1 year and 6 months into that year. So we had a choice either to discontinue the relationship or get married and moved here. And I took the chance. And I was so naive and so innocent that I didn't realize what I signed up for until I was on my flight from from Florida to San Francisco, and I was sitting next to a woman on the plane who was speaking to me and commented on my accent. And she asked me where I was from, and I told her from British Guyana, and she said, "Are you going on vacation?" And I said, "No, I'm going to meet my husband." And she goes, "Have you ever met him?" And I said, "Yes, he was living in the Caribbean." And she goes, "Oh, that's such a great love story. Have you met his family?" And I said, "No, I've never met them." And she goes, "You're giving up everything and moving for people you've never met? What if he was lying to you?" And until that moment, I never thought about that. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the sky somewhere between Florida and San Francisco, I was engulfed with this a tremendous amount of fear. And I had never had wine, and she brought me a drink, and I remember just getting plastered.
Really? For the first time on an airplane?
And it took the edge off of all that for the first time in my life on a plane. And then when I landed in San Francisco, I think I was so buzzed. I walked right past him and then panicked that he hadn't come to pick me up.
You know, a lot of people come to this country, and there's the promise of the great USA. And, you know, you feel, you know, you just left everything that you've known behind, and you're in this new country. Not everything's different, but there's enough different things that you wonder what's going on. And talk to me about that feeling, because when people say that, it's like, what are you complaining about? You're in the US. It's like, yes, I'm in the US, but talk to it. We've had this conversation before, and I love the way you explained it.
My experience moving here is probably different from most people. I came married to a doctor. My ex-husband is a doctor of dental surgery. And so I didn't come here like most people. They come and have to find a job to survive. I came to a pretty comfortable life, but it is still very overwhelming when you've come from a third world country to the US, especially when you come to San Francisco or, you know, any, what I would say, one of the great destinations in the US. And so the first day I arrived, I was overwhelmed because everything was new. I'd never met his family. We were staying with his parents because he was practicing in Modesto. So we stayed my first weekend with his parents who lived in Palo Alto. And they were very gracious, very kind, very hospitable, completely different from my fares on the airplane. And they made me feel very welcome. And then they had a huge wedding reception for us because we had gotten married in Guyana. And I met all his family and friends, and it was great. They were wonderful. However, when you come here, and I had a British education, so every time I wrote, I felt like I was a dunderhead because we spelled a lot of words differently. We put you in color and neighborhood and all this stuff. And so I felt completely dumb. And I was very insecure. And no offense intended. My ex-husband was not the most nurturing person. So it didn't help me much. In fact, I felt like it fed that insecurity. And I think it played a part in getting divorced later. But the support I was looking for from him, I didn't really get it. So the first time, for example, he took me to a grocery store, I was overwhelmed because you have so many different types of milk. Where I grew up, you got the milk from the cows or a can or in the form of powder. And right. Bread, if you didn't make your own bread, there was one bakery, if you didn't get there in time to buy some, then you had to go back home and make something else for dinner or breakfast because that was not like an option. So especially where I grew up in one of the most remote parts of Guyana. And that was because my father was on assignment there. And also he was very strict and protective. And I think he liked having us in that type of environment, which I know he had good intentions, but to me, it had the opposite effect on us because we were not prepared for the world at all. I was so green that you don't even want to hear some of the stupid things I did out of innocence. And I feel like a lot of the scrapes I found myself in were because of that innocence. He also kept us away from any type of romance novels. We weren't allowed to watch movies. So, I mean, I couldn't be more naive. I was like in my 20s and stupid when it comes to life and you know what really goes on in the world. In fact, when I was in high school, my friends used to say, why your father should build a glass coffin and put you and your sisters in it and set it on the side of the mountain so people could just pass by and look at you guys. Because nobody could even talk to us. He was really strict.
Wow.
He wouldn't even put a phone in the house because he didn't want boys to call us. We couldn't look out the windows past 6 o'clock. I mean, I was sheltered beyond, you know. So that when I came here, I felt very, very lost. And I'm not embarrassed to share this. I remember the first weekend we went to the grocery store, he bought artichokes. And I'd never seen an artichoke. And he goes, these are really expensive. So we have to really, you know, we need to cook them before they go bad. So I said, how do you cook them? And he goes, you just boil them. So when he went to work, I got a pair of scissors and I cut each leaf off individually. And when he came home, there was a big pot of boiling water with floating leaves. And then he asked me, where's the heart? And I go, what's the heart? What's the middle? I go, it's in the trash.
Oh my God. That's hilarious.
He was not happy, but he knew that I had no experience with an artichoke. So when I say I don't feel like he was nurturing, a regular person or maybe someone who understood, that this was new to me would say, this is how you cook it, But I tried. And so things like that, were very overwhelming for me. And I feel that after a while, I started to drift apart from him because I felt like I would be forever lost there. I'd just be like a housekeeper taking care of kids and keeping a home. And I felt inside of me was this drive to do that thing, which at the time I wasn't sure what it was. But I knew that I love people. I love hearing about them. I love learning about them. And I think had I stayed in that marriage, I would not be doing what I do today. So everything happens like it should sometimes when you're spiritual and when you're paying attention.
Did you feel like you were somehow, he felt like he saved you and you weren't grateful? Like if you're looking at it from his side, I'm just trying to figure out his side.
No, he didn't save me. I wasn't in need of being saved. When I met him, there were 3 other foreigners that I met because I had friends that were part of an expatriate club in Trinidad where I was living at the time. And there were quite a few people, 2 of them from England, who were also interested in me. So he didn't save me, and I didn't need saving.
No, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to suggest that he did save you. Did he feel like he saved you? Right? I'm not saying that, did you feel like he saved you?
I think he
did. Did he feel like he saved you?
I think he did because a few conversations he referenced that. And I think that's why when I left, it was a big surprise to him because he underestimated how strong and how much of a survivor I am.
Yeah, I think I think immigrants in general share this in that while the United States is great and possibly one of the greatest countries ever, there's still something about where you come from and what you miss when you come here. What would you say is the thing that you still miss about Guyana?
The food, the fruits, and the camaraderie.
The camaraderie.
Yeah.
The food does taste different.
About what kind of house they live in or if they have a car. People don't care about that. They care, where is the party this weekend? That's seriously. Awesome. And they're happy people because you don't define yourself by where you live, what you drive, who you know. You are defined by how healthy you are, how many friends you have, and how much fun you have. Yeah. And so I miss that because the one thing I learned, and it creeps up on you, and you become a part of it without realizing it. When I first came, I had never driven because my father drove us everywhere. And he had no desire to teach the girls in the family to drive, just my brothers. So owning a car was not important. Public transportation is easily accessible out there. In Guyana, in Trinidad, in all the places that I've lived. So a lot of times if you have a car, it's because you really have the money and because you can. But it's not on most people's priority lists. Of course, everyone wants to live in a nice house, but I think more important than a house and a car, it's been how you dress. When you see people out on the streets, they're all beautifully dressed.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I found really strange when I came here, is how little care people seem to have about what they're wearing and how they present themselves. My first shock was the schools. One day I saw a bunch of kids standing outside and I asked somebody, where are those kids coming from? And they told me school. And I saw girls in very short shorts made up, and I was just completely got smacked. I'm like, really? You can go to
Yeah.
school like that in America? Because I grew up Catholic schools where everyone wore a uniform. And even if the school was not a Catholic school, everyone wore a uniform. And it
Yeah.
instilled a certain amount of, I feel like, pride that you belong to that school that wore that uniform. And also when you put it on, you came into school like, I'm ready to learn. But it could be that I identify with that because that's how it was for me. So I'm not knocking how kids dress here, but that was one of the things that really registered. Like I was really shocked by when I came. Like I
Yeah.
say, it's a culture shock. Like everything is shocking. The freeways are overwhelming. It's, you know, you come from a place where the road goes this way and some side streets.
Yeah.
And so
And-
a
yeah. And you know, go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
lot of it is overwhelming.
Yeah. You know, a lot of, you know, with this conversations, like a lot of times people will listen to this and they'll think that, you know, you're lucky to be here. Why are you complaining about something so small? And I just want
But
for
I'm
your
not
listeners, because
complaining.
this is your,
I just want to
I'm,
stop you to say I am not complaining.
yeah,
I'm just expressing my
right.
observations and what registered to me that I had never seen before.
Yeah. No. And I totally, that's what I want to explain to your viewers, because this is your show. It's when you come from a different country, you notice these little things that when we go to other countries, we notice the way they dress, we notice the way they act, but that doesn't take away from the richness or the rich culture of the US or the rich culture of other countries that we go to. But I did want to talk a little bit about that. I know we're running short on time, and I do want to talk to you about being a Black woman in the United States, and especially a Black woman who doesn't look like a Black woman, about conversations that you get into with people not knowing that you're Black and things that you hear. And talk to me about that. Talk about being Black and not being recognized as Black.
I spent the earlier part of my life happy that people couldn't tell I was Black because I was privy to what a lot of Black people go through. And I felt like I've had a very challenging life, but it could have been a lot worse if I didn't look the way I do. Because I feel like I got away with a lot of stuff. Not because people don't know I'm Black, but because of the person that I am. Like, it was easier for me in some situations. Because I have seen and I've been with people who were ridiculing Black people or calling them names, and I've had to jump in and say, oh, well, I'm Black, my mom is Black, my sisters and brothers are Black. And I think that over the last maybe 20 years, I felt more empowered to say that because I was able to mature into knowing that you should never make an excuse for who you are and what you are. That you need to be so strong in who you are and believe in yourself enough that whether you're Chinese, Indian, Black, Portuguese, one eye, one arm, one leg, that you can say, this is who I am and stand proud on that.
Right.
But I have been in many situations where I cringe at what was being said about Black people because the people with whom I was hanging did not know that I was Black or that I had any sort of Black connections. And then each time, sometimes I never say anything, but the times when I do, I wish I have a camera to get the expressions when they find out. So I know that a lot of people experience prejudices. Racism, I think, doesn't only exist for Black people, although right now the question is directed to me because I'm Black, about Blacks. But I feel that different things can create prejudices. Racism, I think, is ignorance. I am prejudiced, very prejudiced against. For a long time, it used to be cultures because I myself was ignorant when I was feeling that way because you can't blame a whole nation because what one or two people do to you. You have to remember that within every culture, within every ethnicity, there are good people, there are lights, and there are dark people. And so what I'm learning as I get older is to not blame the whole barrel for one apple. And I've had some really bad experiences with certain people from certain ethnicities. And so I'm prejudiced against those behaviors, not against the ethnicity, not against the religion, not against the culture, but the individuals within that particular group that have done whatever they did that forced me into that. And while we're talking about this, I would like to say that I think some of the people in this world who continue to get this, after a while, I mean, this sort of racist behavior toward them and blockages because of how they look. I would imagine after a while they just say, enough is enough. I don't give a damn anymore. And then they become angry, and I feel like the anger is what plays out in some of maybe joining again or, doing the things that are not serving them and others.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I understand that.
Yeah. I really like the fact that I think people who admit their prejudices, it's a nowhere conversation when you talk to somebody and they say, well, I'm not prejudiced. And you kind of like look at them. If you say you're not prejudiced, then you really don't know yourself, right? Everybody has some kind of prejudice. I'm not saying it has to be color. I mean, in your case, it's more culture, or it's more certain aspects of a culture that you don't like. But at least it opens the conversation. It helps talk about it. Why don't you like it? What happened? Is it really the culture, or is it really that person that you talk to in the culture? So I honestly admire your answer. I think that was a great answer.
I try to be as honest as always, and I am prejudiced against. I have all types of friends, all religions, all ethnicities, all colors, because I really believe that we're all here because God put us here, and we have a purpose here, and He gave us free will, so we can choose who we want to be and how we want to behave. And
Right.
I'm also responsible for my own behavior. I'd hope I have an impact on other people's behavior to help them to choose light and stay and live in light. But we know that both the yin and the yang are constantly present here. I identify more with people who are lights. I feel very uncomfortable around dark people. And so maybe that's what I am prejudiced against, because usually what they're doing is not good and it's not serving humankind, it's hurting them. So
when you're saying light and dark, you're not talking about the color of the skin. You're talking about personality. I just want to I want to make sure that that's clear, because I know that's what you meant.
I don't care about the color of people's skin. Yeah.
Right.
That never bothered me.
Right. I know that we're very sure we probably have gone over time, but I do want to ask you this question, and it's going to be a kind of a curvy question in a way. In your show, at the end, you always say, a conversation is when a conversation inspiration. So go ahead and say the tagline.
The conversation is all you need to be inspired.
Okay, so here's my question. It's going to be a weird one, Jenny. Okay, so inspired people scare me a little bit, because you look at the Nazis. Hitler, he inspired a lot of people and he did a lot of damage. So beyond inspiration, and I know that's not what you mean when you do your show, but what are you trying to inspire people to do as you're doing this and as you're talking to people?
I think I say it all the time. I think I'm a woman who lives in life and love. And I know that it's not easy to love everybody because some people have hurt us, but I can do that. Even if you hurt me, I can forgive you and love you. And not be in love with you, but love you, because I choose to do that, hard as it is, because I will not let myself hate anybody. So when I say that, what I'm hoping is the conversation that I'm sharing will somehow inspire people in the light from good. And you can take any conversation because it will have both elements present. Because nobody just sits here, and even a pastor, I've interviewed the Archbishop twice, and there are moments of our discussions that were dark. But the whole point of our discussion is to try to draw people toward the light, toward what it takes from people, and in that conversation that can use for inspiration in terms of doing good and bringing good even to the dark situations. So when I wrap up my show and I say that, the inspiration, because it's sort of ambiguous, really, but because I'm a person of light, hopefully there's no ambiguity associated with this, and it's clear that I'm talking about good and doing love. There's so much negativity in the world right now that I choose just to invite conversations of light. As a journalist, I have to be open, but I give more energy to what is good and rewarding and inspiring and has to do with growth and love and productivity, and less to the opposite, although I know I need to be aware of what's happening over there as well.
Jenny, thank you so much, Jennylyn, for taking the time and letting your fans, really, this show is for your fans to kind of get a background of where you come from and why you do what you do so well. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn, where a conversation is all you need to be inspired.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.